we're live.
Okay.
We're live on YouTube and Facebook.
All right. Now awesome. I'm on Instagram Live.
And we got Bart K here. Professor right. Bart K.
We are live around the globe. It's 5 a.m. in upstate New York. What time is it down the southern hemisphere where you're at?
Oh, wow. It's oh, wait. Which is on the southern? Oh, I'm still above the equator. Your turn.
Yeah, must be me. It's 11 p.m. on Tuesday.
Wow.
In New Zealand right now.
Right. And it's 5 a.m. on Tuesday the 4th in upstate New York, where I am at in the beautiful winter wonderland. And we have the most amazing Professor Bart K here to share with us the Randall cycle and many of his masterful ideas of how the human body works, how physiology truly works. And welcome, Professor. How are you doing this beautiful day?
Well, thank you. First of all, it's an absolute privilege. It's a pleasure. I am all about the cross-pollination, me. And I think we need to be doing much more of it. We right-minded, right-thinking promoters of the right truth and the right messages out there. So, yes, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I'm doing fantastically well. It's great. Even though it is 11 p.m., I'm still full of it, ready to go.
Well, usually by about 8 p.m., I'm in bed, and by 9, I'm asleep. And I get up on all crazy hours. And this morning, I do like an hour of walking every morning when I get up at a crazy time. And I was watching something about the organisms in the atmosphere. And I was kind of fascinated, never thought about it, that all these microbes and macrobes and all these organisms live in the air around the globe. And never really thought about it, kind of like the oceans, the waters, and life forms are everywhere. And tell us a little bit about how you got into the professorship of science and biology in the first place, Professor.
Right. Well, I went right through schooling and was unaware of, at the time, having an autism spectrum presentation, which is usually described as pathological demand avoidance syndrome. I only have a problem with 50% of those words, the word pathological and syndrome. The two words in the middle are the actual ones with any useful information, and they are demand avoidance. Basically what it means is, it's a bit more complex than this, but to break it down to its lowest common denominator, what it means is you tell me how to do something, including how to think, and I will absolutely find a way of doing the exact opposite thing. So what it means is I am hardwired to seek the alternate truth. I'm hardwired to seek the thing that is not in line with the thing that I'm expected to swallow. I didn't know it, but I went through school, I did all of that. I left school. I started a generic BS because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't get through my first semester before I was bored of that, by which stage I had discovered skirt, shall we say, and rock music and other less than salubrious behaviours, which I then spent the next 7 or 8 years doing while working in a service station. Then I woke up one morning with a particularly nasty hangover because of a mixture of all sorts of substances without too much memory of last night's musical performance or who was this person beside me, and thought this is no good, actually, and it's not leading me anywhere good. So I need to buckle down and do something useful. So I went back to school. By that stage, I was very interested in sport. So I did a degree in the physiology of rest and exercise, sport and exercise science, basically. And immediately, of course, because of my hardwiring, everything they were teaching me or telling me or, explaining to me how physiology worked, I went, no, that can't be right. No, that doesn't make sense either. No. The other thing that my presentation leads to is one of those memories where you can put information in and it stays there. I can tell you things you said to me years ago. It's just one of those things. So that means I was able to always find the argument that destroys the one that I'm expected to believe and get alongside and all of that sort of stuff. Anyway, it wasn't until I actually quit academia fully and finally some 20-something years later, because I basically got railroaded out of the thing. They basically made it too unpleasant for me to remain employed there, because they wanted me to toe the party line and espouse the accepted narrative, and I wasn't prepared to do it. So we parted ways, me and academia. That was fine. And then somebody suggested to me a couple of things. Number one, I should think about setting up a social media presence, they said, which I had no idea about, and how would I even do that? What? How do you make money doing that? Turns out I was right. You don't make money being a social media influencer. Just quietly, boys and girls. That's not how you get going here. And the other thing they suggested to me is, boy, have you ever heard of this thing called pathological demand avoidance syndrome? It's a sort of autism. And I said, no, but I read the description and it sounded like somebody had written a story all about me. And so I put that in front of somebody that knows about these things clinically, and they signed off on it and said, yes, that's what you've got. So that's the long story short. So basically, I am that bloke with that kind of idiot savant level of understanding of a particular thing that I've focused in on and studied really carefully and all of that. Taken in the concept and the construct of someone who will not think in the accepted way. But I'm going to back up everything I say with absolutely irrefutable arguments because I have to.
Is science an exact? One of the problems is I went through biology and actually I was a nutritional biochemistry in my undergrad degree. And, I find it kind of ironic that I'm kind of in this nutritional world, which just seems a little crazy. Is science really sort of a hard and solid knowledge base that we can rely on for our true health and wellness in this world?
Right. There are some branches of science that you can rely on pretty absolutely in terms of what it is that those branches of science claim to be able to inform on and the manner in which they inform on those things. Example, particle physics. You can rely on that in terms of, do the predictions it makes come to fruition when we observe? And the answer is yes, better than any other branch of science that's ever been developed. You can rely on mathematics to produce the answer to a calculation that, according to the rules of mathematics, it must. It will do that, absolutely. If you think for 1 second that that's the same thing as making a prediction or a prognostic statement about the outcomes of something as so incomprehensibly complex as a human body over time, as it relates to any aspect of the diet, for example, if you think human nutrition science exists, I'm sorry, you've been taken in. It doesn't. All we can do is do the best compromise on actual science with human beings that is possible to do ethically, practically, and financially. What we cannot do is take sets of genetically identical, that is, human beings in pairs, a large number of those, for statistical power, lock them in laboratories for their entire life, controlling every aspect of their existence and experience of existence, except for that one thing we're going to moderate in their diet, for decades, if we want to talk about the results of so doing over decades. We cannot do that work. So we have to compromise. The problem is how far the compromise actually goes when you follow the rabbit hole in terms of nutrition science. It's an absolute ridiculous joke, basically, is what I'm telling
you. Is there one diet that you think that we all human beings should be doing to be healthy?
Right.
And I ask you in a way where, I think we all have listened to you, and you really have some great thoughts and ideas. My grandmother lived 104. She smoked Pall Malls, drank Manhattans, and was an Italian sort of Mediterranean eater.
Mhm.
And one of my good friends, who was the healthiest guy in the world, exercised, dies of cancer at 52.
Mhm.
And we looked at him and thought everything about him was healthy.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. I mean, the question is about, do I have an opinion on the best diet for a human being? What is the species-appropriate, species-specific diet for a human being? Based on the anthropological evidence available to us, my answer to that question is absolutely I have an opinion. And absolutely my opinion is strongly that our entire development as a species over deep time, our entire evolutionary process, indicates that we have eaten almost nothing but the flesh and associated fat of large ruminant animals, very little of anything else. Which means those are the positive and negative selection pressures that have been at play. And ergo, those are the organ systems that are developed in us. Those are the things in us that are perpetuated through the generations. That's what's shaped us. So therefore, there's no reason to suspect that that's not the best thing to continue eating.
Are we just too good at hunting? And in the pressure that we basically created was a lower number or exclusion of many large animals, and now we're sort of forced to figure out what else we could eat in order to survive.
I guess at the end of the day, one of the things that makes human beings successful as a species that has survived various events that other species have not, well, it's multifaceted. First of all, we have intelligence. We can think problems through. We can be problem solvers. We can overcome adversity. Secondly, we can communicate with one another in a meaningful way using a language. Thirdly, we have opposing thumbs. We can fashion tools according to what we've taught each other about how to fashion these tools and how to use them. And then we can go forth and put together the strategy that we as a tribe have decided is the best way to get these woolly mammoth as our prey animals. Too easy. So what's this other small percentage of intake that wasn't that? Well, it was largely fibrous tubers which were boiled to within an inch of their lives for hours and hours and hours on end to loosen them up so that we could chew on the fibers that were left behind, almost no starch in them, basically. And we could then ferment some of those fibers in our gut, a very small amount of that, to produce some short-chain fatty acid as a subsistence thing. But that wasn't our design. That was just a thing that, because of our plant eating past some 5.5 million years ago, we still have some residual capacity to both break down starch using amylase a little bit, and we can also ferment a very small amount of fibers in our gut because there was no negative selection pressure to completely knock that out. Ergo, if the hunt isn't successful for large megafauna or whatever, then I guess we can go home and start digging up these roots and put them in a pot, can't we?
There is I always thought ultimately, it's all other organisms are dead and massive fire and things go through the world, and the plants and the microbes survive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a little bit like we think about the viruses that insert their DNA into our cellular structures, or we reproduce them. Is it possible that even on the plant side, there's an intelligence to plants that may be a controlling factor of who and what we are?
Do plants affect how human beings fit into the ecology of the planet? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's essentially. I mean, we kind of go around this world thinking like we're the smartest entity of the universe, and maybe there's a a masterful manipulation, and we're all kind of in this together, the plants, the microbes, the macrobes, and all these sort of things. And so it's just kind of what is it, the soup, the primordial soup of life. And none of us is any more intelligent, but it seems to me like the plants are pretty smart.
Right. Okay. Intelligence comes in many different forms. Absolutely. We have a kind of intelligence that we value and state to be the highest form of intelligence, I think purely because that's the kind we have. But yes, all other living organisms, both those that are apparently aware and those that are apparently not, they are both underpinned by the same miraculous, unbelievable intelligence, that being the genes carried by those organisms. Those genes in every single living thing, down to the lowest jellyfish, if you like, they are all the absolute peak of the evolutionary process to this point. All of them are the optimization of that particular line of DNA, RNA, over at least 3,800 million years. So yes, absolutely, those things have a miraculous inherent intelligence, which can also be thought of as the anthropic principle a bit, i.e. things are as they are because they couldn't be any other way possibly. When you sort of asked me at the very beginning about some of the branches of science that you can rely on, and I said particle physics, yes, to do what it purports to do. What it cannot do is actually provide any external validity to itself. I mean, objective reality is actually metaphysical.
And ultimately, I always say we really have some great stories to tell, and that's the beauty of all of this. And we love listening and reading and watching the unfoldment of our human stories more than anything. And one of the things that you've probably talked about more than anyone, actually, I know of no one else that's talked about the Randall cycle. And maybe you could introduce the Randall cycle to those that are listening and watching today and in the future, because the beauty of this technology is that what we say today will go on and on and on as long as I can imagine.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so the Randall cycle. I'll tell you two stories. One is a story of the Randall cycle in a way that I hope the average person on the street will be able to grasp. Okay? And then I'll give you another story, which is the biochemical explanation, which I understand will be, for those that don't have a biochemical training or background, this is going to be a lot of words bigger than a wheelbarrow. And you're going to go, I didn't understand that at all. That's why I thought I'd start with, shall we say, layperson's simplified overview explanation of what it is. First of all, the Randall cycle is a lot of things, but one of the things it is not is a cycle. It is actually badly named. It's not a cycle at all. And really, when we're talking about the Randall cycle as that regards to the energetics of cell function and nutrition, what we're really talking about is the apparent effects of the various bits of biological machinery, for want of a better term, that we are thus describing as part of this system, the Randall cycle. We're really talking about its effect as the problem. The effect of a highly activated Randall cycle is the thing that most people will incorrectly, erroneously describe as insulin resistance. And what they will also do in so doing is they will say insulin resistance is the root etiology, the underpinning cause of type 2 diabetes, etc., 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 a whole bunch of list of pathologies they will reel off as being caused at the root by insulin resistance, this amazing mythical pathology. Okay? Insulin resistance is not a pathology, or the thing that most people refer to as insulin resistance. It's actually an activated Randall cycle. An activated Randall cycle tells us that our biology, our metabolic pathways are acting exactly as they should, according to the dictates of those genes that I told you that have been around for at least 3,800 million years and are the peak of evolution, that really know what they're doing. They are in fact working, and what they are working to achieve is to protect your valuable complex cells like muscle cells from the kind of glycative damage that would destroy them under certain circumstances. If a muscle cell has sufficient energetic substrate on hand, it does not need you to pour a bunch of sugar into that cell according to its concentration gradient from the blood, because you've taken in a bunch of carbohydrate that you didn't need. But because its concentration is high in your blood, now the insulin is high, and when the insulin works, that pushes the glucose into the cells and gets it out of the blood. Isn't that great? Our blood glucose has dropped. But what happens to the cytosolic glucose as a response to that? Well, it goes up. And if your cells can't use that glucose for energy right now because they don't need it, then that is going to cause glycative damage in those cells. So the effect of the Randall cycle when it's fully activated is basically to lock the door of the cell from the inside, so that insulin cannot bind to the cell membrane in the way that it does to cause the GLUT4 to exocytose to the membrane so that it can allow glucose through.
Do we have a requirement? I'm sorry, finish up.
Please, no, absolutely. It's a great place to jump in.
Do we have a requirement to consume carbohydrates? And I always, nobody eats a carbohydrate. Nobody eats a protein. You either eat animals or plants. And every cell of every organism contains some fats, some proteins, and some sugars, and then some other stuff within it. And so I sort of wonder about our nutritional science. It seems like it's so exact, and I think you alluded to, maybe it's not so exact. And is there a requirement to eat a carbohydrate or a plant, as I think we should be saying?
Right. Okay. The exact dietary requirement for exogenous carbohydrates for a human being is not 1 single gram ever. 0. That does not mean I'm telling you never to eat carbohydrates, because you might be a type 1 diabetic under medical supervision being prescribed insulin, in which case if you ate no carbohydrates ever and then pumped insulin into you, you might well die. Okay, I am speaking generally to a generalized audience. I'm talking to the middle of the bell-shaped curve right now. That said, a type 1 diabetic can absolutely manage their condition without eating a single gram of exogenous carbohydrate ever as well, so long as they get their insulin right, microdosing it, etc., all of that. All right, so it is a true statement of fact to say that human beings do not require exogenous carbohydrate in the diet. We are capable of producing all the glucose we need ourselves for metabolic processes for those tissues in our body that have to have glucose. For example, your brain, nervous tissues, testes, those kind of things. The process by which we make all the glucose we require ourselves from non-glucose precursors is called gluconeogenesis. It's in any textbook you like. You can go and look it up any day of the week. That is the thing that absolutely determines the fact that the requirement for intake of carbohydrate in the diet is none at all. So that answers that question. Now, why is it a problem to be intaking carbohydrate? Well, if that's all you took, just carbohydrate, assuming that you matched the intake of carbohydrate substrates with your, in effect, actual energetic requirement, then there's no problem. But as soon as you take in more of that than you need, then there might be a problem. However, if you take in some carbohydrate and some fat, now we've got a very serious problem, because if you mix carbohydrate and fat in your diet to any significant degree, That's the thing that kicks this Randall cycle in the guts and causes it to start up regulating its activities. Why? Well, because there's energy in the cell. The energetic substrate is there in the form of the fats rolling through there, rolling through the beta oxidative process. And as such, sugars aren't required right now. And they're damaging. And so let's keep them outside. The sacrificial lambs then become the endothelial cells of the vascular tree, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, the platelets, and other formed elements. Why is that no problem? Because we can replace those quickly and easily, very, very simply. Whereas the much more complex cells like muscle cells, it's much more of an issue to replace those if we have to. So it's obvious that the body would do that. Right, let's protect the muscle cells from damage by glucose that's not needed there by locking the doors from the inside. That is basically the Randall cycle explained in a nutshell. So that's the simple layman's example. And if you want some kind of analogy, think of it this way. If you have a length of hose with a set diameter and length, which has a Y coupling at one end, the closed end, and each of those Y couplings feeds off to a tap of different water supplies, you can obviously affect how much of each of those water sources feed through that pipe to the open end by altering the rate at which each of those taps is open or closed. So not switches, but more like faders. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If maybe you could explain glycation for
Sure,
us.
Absolutely. What that is when sugar molecules chemically bind to protein structures, some lipid structures like the lipid rafts, nuclear substances like DNA, RNA, all those kind of things that are pretty important to make sure messages on how to make proteins get there with good fidelity, all that kind of stuff. These molecules chemically attract and link to sugar molecules that sort of irreversibly bind themselves up to these tissues and as such conformationally deform those tissues and interfere with their function.
When we talk about glycation, and we're consuming a diet, and this is how do we get in this mess? And maybe that's part of the question here, because people eat meat, animals, and people eat plants. They eat 3 to 6 meals a day. It's sort of like this constant hose of feeding us since the day we're born to the day we die. And in utero, our moms are on this constant fueling and filling their bowels and their bloodstream with a tremendous amount of plant sugars, antigens, and chemicals. And maybe you could talk a little bit about sort of the mess we're in, and how did we get from the ancient hunter to the basically we're living in a heroin or an opium den.
Well, I guess at the end of the day, behaviors and cultures develop naturally as part of humans understanding how to best, I guess, take advantage of the environment around us and use it to our own ends. Unfortunately, those ends, because of our invention of finances and ownership of things and having, that kind of like vested interest going on, is that's one of the things that absolutely assures that the pure pursuits like science are absolutely going to become compromised by this nasty, evil money. Now, a lot of people say the root of all evil is money. I actually think the root of all evil is the lack of money. Because at the end of the day, the corporations with a lot of money aren't going to change. And in fact, corporations aren't even people. Although they're legally treated as people, they're not people. They don't have a personality. They don't have a soul. They don't have a God above or any of that kind of stuff. They're just an entity. It's the person, the scientist with a lack of money, who can be corrupted by that corporation with a lot of money, and that corporation's goal is to sell people an idea. Saturated fat is bad, okay? For example. Or cholesterol will kill you, okay? It won't.
That was a great accent.
Thank you. Or, now, you children need to understand that you need to eat a balanced diet, okay? With lots of fruits and vegetables and fiber, okay? No, because if you do that, if you mix your diet, that means you're taking in significant carbohydrate and significant fat. Here is the problem. Here is why the carbohydrate starts to build up outside the cells, as does the level of insulin, basically. So I've given you the analogy, okay, we're talking about a Y connection to a hose, and the rate at which each of the taps is on determines how much of each of that water goes through, and the other one gets competed out to some degree. Cross inhibition, basically. Here's the biochemical description for those that have at least some sophistication with that, just to put you out of your misery. Here it is. When you are oxidizing fat via a process called beta oxidation, what occurs is that there is quite a large production of a substance called FADH2, which is one of the cofactors that transports reducing equivalence to the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. When you are undertaking glycolysis or glycogenolysis, this huge relative increase in FADH2 is not happening. So that's the difference. What is the effect of that? Well, the effect of that, through a bunch of other effects on other chemical reactions in the pathway, is that the cytosolic concentration of ATP drops very slightly, which leads to a reduction in the activity of the ACL enzyme and the ACC enzyme, leading to a vast increase in the concentration of melanol coenzyme A, which will then reduce the fatty acid synthase, upregulate the CPT1, and upregulate the cytosolic concentration of citrate in so doing. So that's when you've got fat burning. So when you're burning fat, the cytosol of the cell will build up a level of citrate in it. Good. When citrate increases in the mitochondria, it's transported out of the mitochondria via an antiport with malate, and thus the cytosolic citrate concentration, that's where that comes from. So when you increase that citrate, what happens is a throttling of the G6P to F16DP enzyme complex, which basically blockades glycolysis right at the top. All right. Therefore, the citrate is not drained through the melanol coenzyme A as effectively as it is, because it's ATP dependent, and we spoke about a drop in the ATP concentration in the cell. And this is what all keeps the fat oxidation rolling. It has an inertia. It's a heavy train. It's taken a bit to get it rolling, this fat burning. And if you want to stop that train, you're going to have to throw the brakes on half a mile before you want the thing to stop. And while ever it's running, it's going to knock down the activity of sugar oxidation through that cross inhibition of entry at the acetyl coenzyme A point of the tricarboxylic acid cycle. All right. So that's the first part of it.
Welcome to Bart K University, by the way.
Yes, welcome.
And by the way, Bart, is there a Bart K University?
There is kind of an entity that exists. That's a legal entity. I really set it up mostly as an affront to the veganerized, mostly to annoy them. I don't actually have any paying students. Because, why would I?
Well, not yet. But I would tell you, I believe that what Bart has to say is really important information, and I think I'd be willing to pay. But I had some other questions for you.
And we have questions also. We have eight questions also.
Lipid raft. Is there like a dinghy going around our cells or our bloodstream?
Got it. A lipid raft is one side of the two-sided phospholipid bilayer that makes up the cell membranes of all our cells. It also makes up the membranes that separate out the nucleus of the cell from the cell cytosol as well. These are the hydrophobic or water repellent bilayers that keep our fluid compartments separate within a cell, but allow the transport of other things across them here and there. So you mess with those by changing the shape of them, by binding sugar up to them. They don't fit together as well anymore. Things can start leaking through, and that's no good.
I mean, it's fluid. You know, we think of this as rigid, like your house, but things are fluid and moving. Isn't that how we should think about it, more or less?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
These things are constantly in flux. They're constantly dynamic. Things are always moving and changing in there. We think of them as structures, but they're really just a bunch of molecules interacting with each other in a way that they're all attracted to each other through a electromagnetic phenomenon, really. So in any case, what we've spoken about in terms of the first part of the Randall cycle there, because it's a two-part thing, being a cross inhibition, what we've had is the oxidation of fat, which powerfully discourages the oxidation of glucose by building up citrate in the cell cytosol, and that blocks that glucose 6-phosphate fructose 1,6-biphosphate enzyme complex, basically cutting off that tree at its very root. At the same time, citrate in the cytosol also apparently directly throttles the GLUT4. That's the locking the door from the inside thing that I'm talking about. The mechanism of that is not yet fully elucidated or fully clear, but it probably involves reduced insulin, reduced energy stress via an AMPK signaling pathway, and perhaps reduced muscle contractile force because of the reduced cellular ATP under fat burning circumstances, probably via a calcium activated calcium channel effect. Those are the thoughts on that at this time. The other thing that happens is that the cellular NADH to NAD ratio and the acetyl coenzyme A ratio to the coenzyme A ratio, those are both artificially held up by the blockade of the enzyme that holds the citrate level up because of it being dependent on NADH, basically. And so what then happens is that the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex is also powerfully knocked down. So it's really, it's blocking out the whole glycolytic pathway at various very important blockage levels. So and ultimately...
All of this is happening, you know, as you mentioned, we kind of look at a cycle and we look at all these pathways, but they're not happening in isolation. There's sort of this soup, and everything is interacting with everything else. Is that right?
Yep. And I mean, if you think of one of those domino shows where dominoes go out in all sorts of directions and end up coming back to some result you wouldn't predict, there it is, basically.
Ali, let's make sure we get some questions, because people here to listen and learn from Professor Bart.
Yes, we will get to the questions. I need to say one thing first. We have 232 people watching. So thank you, everyone, for being here. And we're doing a gift away today of a Kilts Cup. So please put hashtag Bart into the comments section and you will win a Kilts Cup at somebody will win a Kilts Cup. There you go.
Or a Meat Militia Cup.
Or a Meat Militia Cup.
Yeah.
So hashtag Bart into the comments. Yep. Cool. All right. So here is our first question from Jonathan. Good morning, Jonathan. Nice to see you. Would someone's blood volume impact the gradient of Randall cycle activation, or would you describe skeletal muscle tissue glycogen containing as the biggest impactor of mitigating Randall cycle activation?
Yes, it is possible that a person who gets very dehydrated, for example, during exercise, might lead to an artificial increase in the concentration of glucose. And then the glucose would push ever harder on that door, I guess, and would be pushed against ever harder in the case of fat oxidation prevailing at that time. I guess it's possible. Good to see you, Jonathan, by the way. Good to see you.
Is that the answer? Is that the full answer?
Yes, it's possible. The answer is yes. Yes, it's possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question. I don't know if this. Sometimes I don't know if it's a rhetorical question. Anthony says, "How do we know how nutrient dense our food is by what store we shop at? The meats mainly." I guess that's a rhetorical question.
I guess you've got to trust the labels as to, the meat is what it says it is. It's come from where it says it's come from. The only way to know for sure about the nutrient density of any given food sample is to take it to a lab and get them to assay it and find out what's in it.
Are there any toxins that of any significance coming from beef?
Not that I'm aware of.
And there may be thousands of toxins that come from plants.
Yeah, inherently. Now, also, you may well get some toxins with your beef if your beef has been treated in such a way that would predispose it to containing some toxins. Maybe it's had some sort of treatment recently and the meat hasn't been withdrawn correctly and there's still some residual antibiotic in there, for example, or maybe some other drug that may have been put into that cow that shouldn't have been. Whatever that might be. That wasn't too obvious, was it?
No.
Good. Yeah.
I made a comment about plants are trying to kill us, and it nixed. YouTube wouldn't let me fill the comment out. I just said,
we're not having it. No.
And then I said plants may contain toxins. They accepted that.
Yeah.
I was wondering why you said that. This is from Predator Pilates plates.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Predator plates. I feel more sharp memory is better on carnivore. Does brain power become elevated with a carnivore diet?
Well, there is very good reason to believe the carnivore diet to be the most inherently anti-inflammatory diet available to a human being on the basis that it's the most species appropriate, species specific, and contains the least amount of contraindicated plant toxins, which are irritants and pro-inflammatories largely. And as such, you may be in a position, therefore, to think better, be more relaxed, have better grasp of yourself, as it were, for want of a better terminology. That, and you won't be suffering from the vast amount of nutrient deficiencies that people that like to eat plants solely have, that brain fog that they get, the need to repeat themselves and to regurgitate mindless nonsense without thinking about it, because they hate thinking, those people, don't they? They really do.
Here's the next question. Happy carnivore. Is multiple smaller meals throughout the day going to increase the human metabolism?
Increase? Will it increase your basal metabolic rate? It depends really on a number of factors, including the makeup of the meals, the timing of the meals, the effect of those meals on your particular hormone responses, the amount of food taken in at each of the 4 or 5 meals. Are you talking about a situation where the amount of intake of food is controlled and it's 3 or 4 meals versus 1 meal? Under what sort of controls? There are many degrees of freedom that can play into all of that. At large, it seems to me that the best approach is to eat 1 meal a day, if for no other reason than when you eat any food whatsoever of any kind, the immediate response that your body has is to go into a kind of pre-inflammatory, pre-autoimmune shock state, ready for action in case this meal is the one that contains the pathogen. Why is that? Well, because before we started hunting, we were scavengers first.
Mm-hmm.
That's why.
Did we wait for the cook or did we eat it before the cook?
There is very good reason to believe that most of the meat eaten by humans throughout history has been eaten raw.
And possibly rancid, or what's the word? Like,
yes, absolutely. Like
rotten.
Yes.
Yeah.
So therefore, what's evolved along that lines is the body's natural reaction to immediately go onto high alert in terms of immune system every time you put food in your mouth, just in case. And then over several hours, the body works out this is not the one, this is not a problem, we're okay, and that gets toned back down. So if you eat 3 or 4 times a day and each inflammatory peak, if you like, lasts several hours, you could spend 6 to 8 hours inflamed every day. You eat once a day and you get it over and done within 1 hit.
That's great. Well, that leads right into this next question. You probably already answered it. Richard Hepburn, good evening from Australia. Lion diet for 5 months. Is it okay to fast while I'm healing from autoimmune disease?
Yes. In fact, it's one of the indications, one of the reasons you might use fasting as a clinical tool, and I certainly do in my practice. Autoimmune dysfunction, we can easily justify the use of fasting as a very, very useful tool in getting that under control. Yes.
I'm on day 2 of my 3-day fast, which I do every month, and I do a 5 to 7 day fast quarterly, and typically 1 meal a day. And I would say fasting, like no matter what your diet is probably one of the best things anyone could do. Would you agree, Bart?
Yeah. Yeah. If you've got autoimmune dysfunction, I would fast. Yeah.
Are the recommended daily allowances, are those scientifically accurate?
Here's how we work out the daily recommended intake of any given nutrient. The government goes to the advisor for dietary practice in that country in general and says, put together a board of academics that can inform us on the state of science on this and tell us what numbers we need for each individual given nutrient as a human being. So what happens is the government appointed authority will go to a friend of theirs who is probably the editor of a journal with several of their mates that like to send papers into that journal and get them published. Good old boys club. And so that person is then asked to fill the seats on that board of advisors. So they do with their friends who are going to agree with them. And they arbitrarily decide on what number they think they should throw at this, because there is no experimental science available on human beings that can tell us. And so it's best guess. And they throw that number on there, and so that's what you need. And then they usually add a bit for safety, so-called, despite the fact that a bit more might actually be dangerous in terms of a lot of things, because everything seems to have an optimal level, the best level it can be. And if it's lower than that, it's a problem. And if it's higher than that, that's also a problem. So, yeah, there's no experimental science behind RDAs, RDIs, no.
The American
opinion statements. They are consensus opinion statements.
The American College of OBGYN in America recommends primarily a plant-based diet, a Mediterranean diet, limited red meat, pretty much no red meat. And they also recommend red wine for pregnant and lactating women.
Awesome. That's good thinking.
Would you agree with that statement?
I would not. Any of those statements, no. The first and most obvious thing to go to is like the last thing a pregnant woman should go anywhere near is alcohol, under any circumstances. Secondly, plants are pro-inflammatory, devoid of or destitute of the right balance of nutrient for a human being, full of anti-nutrients, pro-inflammatory things and toxins that are likely to cause problems, metabolic dysfunction and all sorts of misadventure, shall we say, apparently. I mean, the fact that there is a so-called professional body of individuals that make a recommendation, e.g., for example, the board that you just mentioned, that doesn't mean that there's any science behind their recommendations. It's a consensus opinion statement, and usually it's just bought and paid for, actually. I mean, show me an experimental piece of work where they took a bunch of pregnant women, fed half of them a Mediterranean plant-based diet, and the other half of them a carnivore-based diet, energy matched, good luck even doing that, and keep them in labs and, do experiments on pregnant women, basically.
Yeah.
You can't do it.
And once again, we've sort of been all relegated to a science based on our leaders of the world that basically want to take our money and make it theirs.
Yes, and with that in mind, please do all send me all your money. Don't question me, because I am the science. I am. So I'm safe and effective. Absolutely. Above reproach. Don't question me at all, even though, questioning science is exactly how you do science, by the way. But no, we won't be having any questioning of me.
anyone that you know of ever had an anaphylactic reaction to ribeye steak?
No, not to steak. An anaphylactic reaction, yes, but not to steak.
Right,
it's possible, though. It is possible. Crazier things have happened at sea. At the very least, you can get a nasty reaction if you're a sufferer of alpha-gal, for example.
What can you explain alpha-gal to our listeners?
Yeah, that is an acquired autoimmune problem that people will acquire by being bitten by the Lone Star tick, and it causes an allergy to red meat to develop in that person. I can't think of anything worse. Well, I can actually think of worse things, but let's not go there.
Which it ultimately is not an allergy to the meat; it's an allergy to the antigens of the tick or something else.
Exactly. Goodness gracious, the King of Tasmania, Harry Sopanos, is with us. Nice to see you.
Right.
King of Tasmania.
No, he's not really the King of Tasmania. We just call him that. The King of Tasmania is still Charles III of England. Just to be clear.
And the beauty of life, you could call yourself whatever you want.
That's right, and I do. I call myself all sorts of things, and some of them are true. Depending who you listen to, of course.
Is there an event coming up in April in Australia that you and I may be cohabitating?
Look, that could potentially occur. Yes, that could occur. I did the same event in Adelaide, organised by the same wonderful people, Melissa and Anthony over there in Adelaide, and I got to bunk with Dave Mack, and that was a hoot. That was awesome. But yes, Dr. Kiltz and I will both be at the Carnival Collective Live to be held 26th of April in Melbourne. So, yeah, look out for tickets for that. I think they're already on sale, and get it down here.
It's going to be
awesome. I'll be there. So will Ted. Ted's coming.
Oh, Ted.
He'll be there. So watch yourselves.
There are a couple more questions, and I have a couple of questions also.
Sure.
Go at it, Alia.
There's several more questions. Let's just take this last one. Brenda, I keep hearing that men and women are different and women need to eat more often. This is said because the main studies are done on men. Any validity to this?
Well, yes, men and women are different. I've done some research into this. I've checked it out, and I can confirm that men and women are very clearly different in many respects, including metabolically. Yes, there is some divergence, I guess, between men and women. The idea, however, that you would need to eat more regularly than a man is not really supported by science. That's not really a thing, I don't think, personally.
I've got a comment on Instagram from Life of Joan. My friend's son can't break down protein.
Yeah.
Is this a true statement? Do you think? When you eat, have you ever seen meat in the toilet?
No, I haven't.
And so,
well, not coming from the anal end.
Okay.
I definitely have when I've drunk too much a couple of times, but that's coming back up the other way.
And protein. So, does any animal search for protein, or are they really just looking for kind of what they've been eating for the last 3.5 million years?
Well, the thing is, our instincts are well ingrained, and they're ingrained according to the DNA that we have, and our instincts know what we need, except when it comes to carbohydrates. We have really good satiety signaling in terms of protein and in terms of fat, but in terms of carbohydrate, our satiety signaling is broken down by the very fact that actually our biological design is to generate our own glucose from non-glucose precursors according to gluconeogenic pathway, rather than to source glucose by consuming it in the diet. That's actually the thing that's throwing our system completely off. How does that happen? Well, let's talk about the other side of the Randall cycle. That's a brilliant segue. I couldn't have actually put that together better myself.
That's why we're here today.
Well, there you go. Here's what it is. When a lot of glucose is available in the blood and is pouring through the GLUT4 transporter, because the ATP level in the cell is such as that the rate of that is optimized, and the citrate in the cell hasn't built up because there isn't that blockade on the citrate draining out by the blockade of the aconitase enzyme, then the fructose, glucose at the very top, that enzyme complex at the top of the glycolytic pathway, that becomes unburdened and can operate at full rate. The pyruvate dehydrogenase complex is unburdened by that blockade of the NADH to NAD plus ratio, etc. And then pyruvate goes through that PDH complex and becomes acetyl coenzyme A. Thus, the citrate that rolls out of the mitochondria into the cytosol under those conditions doesn't build up precisely because there is enough ATP still in the cell cytosol that the ACL enzyme and the ACC enzyme can both operate at full rate. That drains the citrate out through the melanol coenzyme A pathway, and melanol coenzyme A then inhibits the CPT1 transporter of fatty acid into the mitochondria, thus blockading its entry there, and increases the activity of the fatty acid synthase enzyme, thus leading to the production of triacylglycerides for either storage in that muscle cell or after a certain point export from that cell to the blood. So what we're saying is if you eat a bunch of sugar, it will inhibit the oxidation of fat. And if you eat a bunch of fat, as we described earlier, that will inhibit the oxidation of carbohydrates. Two fat men trying to push their way through a revolving door at once.
Let's see, how long did human beings evolve probably eating only animals or significantly more animal than eating any significant plant?
So human beings in our current form, our current speciation, Homo sapiens sapiens, thought to have walked the planet for roughly 350,000 years. We started eating any significant amount of plant material whatsoever at the agrarian revolution roughly 12,000 years ago. If you convert the human existence into a 24-hour time period, we started eating plants at 11:59 p.m. We have not had time for our genes to adapt to this change in our diet away from what was ostensibly a hyper-carnivore existence. Now, this isn't maybe, this isn't a guesswork, this is a fact based on stable isotope testing that tells us that humans have eaten this diet of the flesh and fat of animals and almost nothing else for that long. No guesswork, slam dunk.
How do you domesticate a human being?
Well, personally, how do I do it? I've got we've got our first two victims arriving on Friday to stay with us on the farm for a bit. We're doing this thing where we're offering people to come and stay on our farm for a bit, give us a bit of labor, 20 hours a week. We'll feed you, we'll put you up, we'll point you in the right direction in terms of some of the tourist things around this part of the world, which is beautiful. We'll show you where the best beaches are. So we've got our first two young victims arriving. So that's how we domesticate them. We offer them things. We get them here, and then it's like the Hotel California. I'm just kidding. You'll be fine, kids. See you on Friday.
It is 11:59, so it's almost time for plants to be in the Bart K evolutionary.
Yes.
Yep. I do have two more. There's a lot more questions, but I just want to.
Bart, do you have a couple more minutes?
Yeah,
I can answer this one.
It's midnight, so I can talk as long as you like. I've got nothing
Is your
else
wife
on.
asleep? Your wife's sleeping.
Well, probably not, given the fact that my voice carries. But she knows how important this is, so she'll just wear it. I'm sure she will.
I can answer this one. Christy, yes, these lives are on YouTube. You can see them on YouTube after the live. Go to the live section on either Bart K's tab or Dr. Kiltz's tab. There you go. DC would like to know this. Do you believe you might be going to Brisbane on the 27th?
That's been proposed. That's something that we're looking into. I haven't said
We're all
yes or
looking
no.
into it.
We're all
Yeah,
looking into it.
I haven't said yes or no yet to that, Dave. But it's definitely in the thinking.
It's in
Bart,
the thinking process.
Bart, can you comment on cerule and tell us a little bit about your supplement and how it may affect people in a positive way?
Yes. Well, first of all, you'll grow 2 heads, and that's awesome. No, I'm kidding. You won't grow 2 heads.
You might think like Bart K.
Maybe you will.
Oh,
Okay, look. The company with which I'm joint ventured, which Dr. Kiltz is inviting me to do the promo for, is a company called Cerule, which I'm sure most people that follow me have heard about because I bang on about it a bit. Here it is. Basically, we have 3 main nutraceutical supplement products that I support and promote. These are not nutritional. There are no nutrition deficiencies on a carnivore diet. You do not need to nutritionally supplement with anything whatsoever. These products are being promoted by me because they have a specific effect on the human body that I haven't found a better alternative to achieve the same thing, basically. I discovered this product about 15 years ago, serendipitously, at a time when I was diagnosed with a very serious eye condition and told that I would lose my sight entirely by the time I was 45 years of age, that there was nothing they could do about it. To slow the process down, perhaps I should not smoke. I said, check. I should not drink. I said, well, hang on. Don't go crazy. They said I should probably avoid all that red meat and saturated fat, have a nice balanced diet, make sure I get lots of leafy greens and vegetables and things. I eat the rainbow, I was told, because, I don't know, maybe I'll be deficient in sky blue pink or something. And I could have some injections of stem cells directly into my eyeballs if that would be, if I'd like that. And I said, no, I don't think I would. Thank you very much. $200, they said, suck it up, get ready. You're going to go blind. I was terrified. But anyway, I wasn't even looking for this product. But what happened was I was reading an advertisement in the local paper. A predecessor company to this rural company was looking for a scientific advisor to fly around the major centres in New Zealand and Australia and train their sales force on what they should say about this product and what they shouldn't. Anyway, this product turned out to be, the main product turned out to be an adult stem cell enhancing agent. So what does it do? It encourages your body to release your adult stem cells with your DNA in them, blank cells, from your bone marrow where they're stored into your bloodstream. Then what they do is they tool around in your bloodstream until they encounter a tissue that's in need of repair or renewal in some way. It's dysfunctional, it's diseased, it's physically damaged, it's chemically damaged. There are flags on the cell saying, hey, I'm done. You need to replace me with a new one. And that's what these adult stem cells do. They bind to the old cell, they break the old cell down, dissolve it, send a message telling it to self-destruct. We get all the rubbish out of the way, we recycle what we can, and we get rid of the detritus that we can't. And that adult stem cell then differentiates into an adult cell of the exact kind required to replace the one that's damaged beyond repair. Isn't that fantastic?
In the environment we live, even for us carnivores, I mean, we live in these boxes, and the environments everywhere seem to contain a tremendous amount of toxins. I mean, the air we breathe, obviously in our industrial lifestyle we live, there's some factors that may be harmful. Briefly, where can people find your what we call, it's not a supplement, what do we call it?
Well, we call it a nutraceutical. You can call it a supplement if you like. I mean, it's got to be labeled as something, so you can call it a supplement. It's a nutraceutical. There you go. And you find it at the address, which is at my left shoulder as we speak, basically. That's where you go. bkaynutrition.cerule, cerule.com. And you can order up Stem Enhance there. But the other products you should get probably are an anti-inflammatory called Cyactive, which knocks down the activities of both LOX and COX pathways without the side effects that the standard pharmaceutical drugs have, which is great. And we also have Plasma Flow, which is an enzyme preparation designed solely to break down a specific protein, that being fibrin. And fibrin is a protein that drops out of your plasma and becomes a fibrous spiderwebby plug when you're inflamed, thus preventing nasties from moving around. It's kind of a normal indicated acute reaction. However, because we're chronically inflamed, it never clears. So we've got this clogging, so our stem cells can't get there. So if you're going to invest in releasing the stem cells, you should probably clear the pathway so that they can actually be useful. So that's a powerfully synergistic package of 3 products. That's what you need. You get 18 to 20% discount if you get that package on auto ship. 3 products on auto ship.
We'll put a Kilts discount on there.
Oh, lovely. There you go.
We'll work that. Where do we find? Where can people find Professor Bart K?
Well, if you go to the YouTubes and you type in @BART-KAY, that'll take you straight to my channel. Or you can search for me by name, and the first 10 pages of results at least will be me. You can't miss it. And what you'll find is everybody saying positive things about Bart K. Nobody's got anything at all negative to say about me. I've been very lucky in that regard. It's been awesome. So yeah, that's where you find me on the YouTube.
We all love Bart K. Who's our winner today?
Oh, okay. No, well, let's give one more minute. Everyone put hashtag. We have 247 people watching. Put hashtag Bart into the comments, and we're gonna see who wins. You got 1 second. You got 1 second to do that. Nobody's doing it. Everybody. Hashtag Bart. All right. You lost your chance. All right. Here we go.
I did throw my name in there. I wasn't figuring out what I was going to give if I won.
Let's see. We'll do it. Yeah. Let's see. Draw. Here we go.
Perhaps we should sing about what you should have for breakfast while we're waiting.
Cheryl Camp.
Well, throw in next time, Bart, a trio of your supplements. That'd be a good one.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Awesome. All right.
Cheryl, you need to email alia@doctorspelledout.kilts.com, and I will give you your Kilts cup. I'll send it to you. There you go.
We'll
Congratulations,
see you, Bart. We'll see you in April, if not before, on our magical way of sharing in the world with social media, which is the new social medicine. And the more you share these with your friends and family, even your enemies, I guess, we're all going to be healthier and learn more about the magical Professor Bart Randall K.
Okay.
The unicorn. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.